I don't know how to find settings. Yeah, hi, this is Juan. I'm trying to do the live stream. Any person, if you have a browser on your computer, you can go to YouTube, or if you just click on that link that Chris sent, you will be on my channel. Yeah, so if you go into my channel, you don't have to give YouTube any information. You should be able to see on the. Unfortunately, I'm a little constrained here. You see somebody playing piano? Hold on a second. Don't. Can you hear any sound? Can you hear this? You hear the sound? All right. Excellent. Bye.
It's people watching already. Is it a few minutes? It's about 3 minutes.
Welcome all fellow travelers in this strange life we're in. I'd like to welcome you to the Stephanie Sydoriak Memorial Celebration of Life. I'd like to thank Ruth Williamson for that lovely introduction you did. Ruth was a long-time friend of Stephanie's and gave her many charming conversations over the years, especially in the last few years. Stephanie's face would light up when Ruth came into the room. Ruth is going to do one more classical number for you, and then we'll have this.
I'm checking just to make sure is the sound okay. That is probably a problem with their router and the speed over here, so there's nothing I can do about that. Hopefully, yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Bye. We're gonna turn the phones off. So.
Thank you. Now, daughter Chris Sydoriak is going to present a piece of music for you. I'm going to accompany her. We haven't seen each other for quite some time, so we'll probably get together rather quickly. And the microphones are not the greatest up here. They're not really made for instruments, so those of you in the back may have a little trouble hearing it. We'll do as best we can. This is a Kate Wolf song.
And I just have to give apologies to Kate because I changed the words to make it appropriate for the There's something I would say. What brings us together here? That's just us all. Love has made us simple, and it pulls us all inside. We're strangers, are like family, and loneliness can't hide. You must give yourself love. Love is what you're after. Open up your heart. Tears and laughter. Give yourself to love. Give yourself to love. I find these mountains in the rain. I love the wind. I've been up before the sunrise to watch the day begin. She shared with us her passion for all that nature holds. But like sunshine on a cloudy day, she gave us all her love. Give yourself to love. That is what you're after. Open up your heart. Tears and laughter. Then give yourself to love. Give yourself to love.
Thank you so much. Stephanie was loved by so many people. Many people have expressed that love. The thing about well-loved people is that they're very loving, and she was a very loving person. I can't think of a time when I really heard her say bad things about people. Maybe she thought them, but she didn't express maybe anything like that. Stephanie went through a number of difficulties through her life, as we all do, perhaps a few more than most of us. But she overcame them, and she maintained a sense of love and good cheer through most of it. The first difficulty she had was being born a female. There were a lot of things that men could do that she wanted to do that she wasn't really allowed to do. But she was a self-proclaimed tomboy as a child. She ran with the boys in the neighborhood. Of course, they picked on her all the time. And at one point, they were playing cowboys and Indians. Of course, she was the Indian princess, so they tied her to a tree. And they left her there for hours in a boggy swamp in Boston. And she started getting bit by mosquitoes. She was quite angry. She eventually freed herself and went home and scared her parents to death with a number of mosquito bites all over her body. But that was one of the early moments when she realized that being a woman was a bit different than being a man. She had an older sister as well, 14 years older than her. She was born in 1926, I should say. And her sister was 14 years older, so you can imagine a teenage girl having to take care of an infant while the parents are off desperately trying to make a living during the Depression. There was quite a bit of pressure from her sister, but she survived that and she maintained good relations with her sister and took care of her after she moved here and was a good friend to her. So she didn't let those things get her down. She was a very curious woman. She loved to read. She loves words. And so when she got her first library card, she would walk down the street by herself, sneak away from home sometimes to get to the library. And she didn't want to just read some of the books. Like, we'd go to the library, we'd think for a while. No, she started with A. And over the course of several years, as a child, she got all the way to Z. And she read hundreds of books that way and got a wide variety of inputs. She was so curious that she did very well in school, went to Northeastern University at the age of 16, one of the first 4 women to be allowed into Northeastern University. And she went into the physics department, which is even more amazing. And I think she was the only woman there. She graduated and went on to graduate school in master's. During this time, she met her lifelong love, Steve Sydoriak. And together they went to Yale, and she went into the graduate program in physics. She was the only woman there. And they would work on projects together, and he would get an A and she would get a C, because she's the woman. And she went into the dean's office, and they would say, well, yeah, there's not really a place for women, so you really have to support your husband, because he's the one that's going to be the scientist, not you. So she carried this to the end of her days, regretfully, wanted to be a physicist her whole life. So she had a couple of kids there, and they got news that they were going to New Mexico. Oh boy. Grew up in back east, and you think New Mexico is just a dry, dusty field with nothing growing and tarantulas. So, but when they first woke up here in Los Alamos and opened up the windows, the curtains on their home, and saw the mountains, it was love at first sight, and they just loved this place. They hiked everywhere. Outdoors people, skiers, taught all of us kids how to love the outdoors. Wonderful thing. They had a very happy marriage. That's one thing that us kids often commented on. We didn't hear them argue. We saw them kissing each other. We didn't hear them yelling or putting each other down. I mean, it was amazing. They had 6 children, which is a lot of work for a woman to do. Another one of her great obstacles, I suppose, and one of her greater joys. She also had a strange illness that caught up to her about the age of 28, where she would lose all control of all of her muscles and be just can't move. You're in a chair. The kids are running around, desperate for help from mommy. And of course, the doctor said, "Oh, it's just hysteria. Get over it." Well, after a few years of this, it was really scary. Where my dad had to rush home a few times, thinking that she might stop breathing. They found it was a myasthenia gravis, a periodic form of myasthenia gravis. So she suffered with that through her life. She had some medications to take care of it, but she kept kept her spirits up. She kept her love of life. She didn't become bitter. She didn't complain. She didn't bemoan this fact. She just went through it. And she tried to make everyone else more comfortable than she was at all times. She was very into the Ukrainian cultural lifestyle. You can see from the book she wrote that she was half American and half Ukrainian in her heart. She developed in Los Alamos a small Ukrainian community. Eventually, people would come from around the entire state to her Ukrainian parties every year or so. That's the affairs of Ukrainian food and music. And she was also a piano teacher in town. Some of you might have had her as a piano teacher, possibly. I've come across a few people. And she became the president of the Los Alamos Music Teachers Association and eventually president of the New Mexico Music Teachers Association. She really loved music. That's one thing she imparted to all of us. All of us kids in music in some form or other. But when the end of the 60s came around and we came home from college and there was strange new music in the house. Grateful Dead, the Eagles, the Doors, and my mother embraced it all. I remember one day coming home from school and my mom was dancing around in the living room with Grateful Dead. She went on to many concerts with my brothers and sisters and danced, up into her 80s, I think it was. And of course, the kids at the concerts were just loving. But she really loved her music, and she encouraged it in all of us. Then she had quite a large tragedy in her life. One of her daughters was killed through violence, and it put an enormous strain on the marriage of both of them. And that they turned to alcohol for solace, and it just about destroyed everything. My mother decided one day that she just was going to stop, and she did it. Never had another sip for the rest of her life. And that was an inspiration to all of us to just remember how serious that issue can be. And her marriage grew in many more ways after that. But it wasn't too long after that when my father started experiencing symptoms of dementia. And she took care of him for 15 years as he slowly slid away. Talk about a huge obstacle in your life. But every time we would come to visit, she would just smile at us, give us the biggest hug, cook us meals, laugh, tell stories, play crossword puzzles and Scrabble games. And how are you doing? She said, oh, fine. It's amazing how she was able to keep her spirits up through all of this. After my dad passed, she started a new life. She wrote 2 books and a book of poetry have been published. They're in the back there. You can find them on Amazon still. Stories about her upbringing and then the move to Los Alamos. She loved words. She loved Scrabble games. She loved crossword puzzles up until 93, 94 years old. We'd do the Sunday New York Times together on the phone. So she loved that. Toward the end of her days, when she was in the hospital, she looked up and she said, I think I might be dying. And if I'm dying, I should be dancing in the halls. She still had her sense of joy and happiness. So that was Stephanie. And now I'd like to have just a moment of silence for you to think about the ways that Stephanie touched your lives. I don't see my oldest brother here. See? Maybe you're too. Right here. Oh my gosh, he's even wearing a great headband. I'm just like looking all over the place. I don't even see my own brother. Got a few words you like to say?
Thank you all. That was nicely said, right now. Okay, so I want to start by saying Is that close? Even closer? Hello. That it was great being a kid around mom and dad. I'm just going to say mom and dad. I don't care when they died. It was really great. Like, and if you take kids as probably the best indicators of who the coolest adults are, you know, that the kids all came to our house because we had the best toys to begin with. They curated the toys amazingly. Oh, and you were there too. Yeah. Oh, yes, right. Yeah, yeah. They bought really, interesting toys to challenge your intellect or your athleticism or whatever. But they also invented toys. Dad would go to the workshop, and on Christmas morning, you'd wake up and there'd be toys. Like one toy would go from there to there and over to here because you had to take the blanket off and find out what it was and what to do with it. Mom, there was a certain age when I got to be maybe around 10, and she would talk to me about ethical things, And the one thing that really stood out in my mind, and I kind of aspired to, was the idea of poverty, and where her family came from. Like her dad, what came over, he was a smart man. He apparently directed plays and stuff like that, and but he could only get a job as a janitor, but as he worked over the course of his life, he rose in stature until he was a janitor when he died. But what a man! And I think it's like that feeling that you don't have anything special. There's nothing special about you that's attached to money or your standing in the community. That is really what's in your heart that you have every day. Thanks for all that stuff, that these talks that we had together. I don't know. There's one more thing, but I can't remember what it was. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from son Eugene.
One thing that me and my mother shared was the love of poetry. We would periodically just sit down and write something. But we had a very different approach. She would write a poem and then rewrite it, and 20 years later, finally say that it's ready for publishing. And, me, on the other hand, I just sit down and write, and usually don't make one change. This was one that I wrote to her on her 80th birthday. It expressed, it dives into one thing that she was always torn between her desire for this career in physics and her having children. And she loved both, but there were times that you could tell that she just, I wish she didn't have all these kids. This is money. Okay. To my mother, what made her so uniquely her? What experience, what sight combined to make her different and distinct? Was it being raised by immigrants? Yes. But no. There were many like her, held a little apart. Was it being smart? That can be one, surely. Was it spending her youth during war? The tightening, the fear? No. That was shared by many. If anything, to escape without family bed was unusual. Was it going to college so young? To live, go to grad school, to get pregnant. That was shared, to give the raw, ready birth. And then, to give again, and again. But it stopped running. And again, again, again. When will it end? Yeah. How deep that experience with mother, giving birth, ending, raising, consoling, scolding, 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 crying out in anguish, screaming with rage at the death of a child. And then that happens too often, every day, many times a day. No, it seems she is not so much different as connected, but the deepest struggle, her heart beating with the heartbeat of mother, the maker of life, the breather, the milk maker, the food giver, mother all around the world, squeezing out past impossible narrow restrictions to state unequivocally, yes, that is what is precious. This is our gift, our blessing, our reason to be one with that heart, living, beating, bringing blood to the world as it gracefully runs through the wide emptiness. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was Mother. Yes, but no, she is more than that. She is life, a word of life, living in our hearts. Want to speak, Chris? Daughter, Miss Sydoriak.
So, I didn't know anything. This happened literally with birthday too. These guys have all these amazing poems and everything, but every time I thought about her and the fact that, she used to say, how come they can't have funerals for people while they're living, so they get to hear all the wonderful things about them? And every time I sat down to try to write something about her, I would think about that, and it would make me cry. I think, she was only baby, or maybe this was my gift, but still, I was just like thinking she was going to die, and all this. So anyway, I apologize, Mom. I tried my best, but I was so lucky to have her growing up. I mean, we were so close. And I was mentioning as we were burial this morning, that one thing that I just loved that she did was she gave me this wonderful hug. And then she would draw back her head and she would smile at me like I was everything. Like I was everything to her. And I know she did this with other, all the people and my siblings and all, but it was just, I just felt so connected. And the other thing was her wisdom, that maybe a lot of you have experienced this as well. You go to her, you unburden yourself, tell her everything is wrong, and she thinks for a second, and then she comes out with the most profound, pithy thing that is so loving, non-blaming, accepting, that you're just like, oh, non-blaming, accepting, that you're just like, oh, I get it. Thanks. So, thank you for all.
So I wasn't really going to speak more because I already spoke so much, but I just did want to say how much I feel blessed with her. Stephanie is my mother, and her brain, the brilliance of her brain, her smarts, and also giving us the free rein to make mistakes, learn from doing them. She didn't always solve our problems. Like Chris said, she would just look at you and sometimes say, well,
Looks like you're working hard on figuring it out. Great. We're going to have a couple of pieces over the course of this from friends of Stephanie who couldn't be here. And Sayati, my daughter, Stephanie's granddaughter, will read some of these.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming. So this was sent in by Craig Russell, sent on July 15th. What an honor and blessing to have grown up on 41st Street with our Russell household catty corner to the Sydoriak house, a magical place that was both home plate and Grand Central Station for all the kids in Western area. Mr. and Mrs. Sydoriak made that house a welcoming, safe, enchanting place where fun and learning were commonplace. When I would go visit Mary or Jean, the closest mage to me, Mrs. Sydoriak was always present, showering us with loving attention, but giving us plenty of space to just be kids. She never hovered in a way that might have inhibited our childlike sense of wonder with things. But I was aware that she was always there, keeping us safe. Stephanie Sydoriak opened doors for me with her passion for music and the arts. She played piano very well, and I remember later when I was grown, learning of her consummate skill as a poet. I became enamored with her poetry, so much so that I asked her permission to set some of her sensitive and insightful poems as songs for women's chorus. When I was about 5 years old, I remember wandering across the street to my neighbor's house as Mrs. Sydoriak was working in her garden. I followed her around, almost like an exuberant puppy, always underfoot, blurting out a steady commentary about dinosaurs, a topic with which I was completely consumed. She was so tolerant and nurturing, and she treated me as if I actually mattered, even though I was just a tiny tot. From my earliest memories, Stephanie Sydoriak treated me and each of us as a unique, blessed creation, and I can never thank her enough for showering us with that loving care. The Sydoriak household sponsored all sorts of carnivals with games, candied apples, and other treats, and forts that were full-scale structures worthy of Frontierland at Disneyland. I loved winters with you creaming Christmas star on their chimney and the various igloos that we kids had built by making blocks of ice in cardboard boxes and then building those dome shelters. So magical. And Mr. and Mrs. Sydoriak were instrumental in making that happen for all of us. Stephanie taught me and all of the neighbor kids how to make Ukrainian Easter eggs, and some of hers were masterpieces. Each was refined and enthralling and detailed, and if I recall correctly, Kathy, daughters, were equally amazing. Each Sydoriak is burned in my heart, and if I start telling stories of each of them, this will become a novel, not a simple remembrance. I cannot believe how wonderful each of them is, and how much they have shaped me. If there's any good in me as a person, it usually is connected to some Sydoriak in some dramatic way. It would take more than one single lifetime to thank Stephanie Sydoriak adequately for her many kindnesses. On this day of remembrance, even though I must remain in California, I nevertheless will hold Stephanie close in my heart and be thinking of you at Fuller Lodge. I send each and every Sydoriak my loving gratitude for having been such a blessing in my life.
That choral piece that he spoke about was performed in Santa Fe to great acclaim. Steve Lawrence, your grandson.
Great, yeah, thanks. Thanks for being here. Yeah, so I'm her eldest grandson. Felt so lucky to have grandma as my grandma. I was so proud of her. It's like usually they're all the way around, right? They're proud of you, but I was so proud of her. Right? A number of people I told in my life that she was the first woman in Northeastern University, the smartest person in our family, which is no set of slouches in terms of intelligence and everything. So and it comes down to this and this sort of theme about how sad she was that she didn't get to be a physicist. I mean, I sympathize with that, right? I work with a lot of great scientists in my field and who are women, and I understand how much struggle they go through even today. And so I feel that, but at the same time, like if she had become a physicist, we would have potentially missed out on some of the things were so great about her. And as I was looking through, her the way she raised her kids, and this theme comes up a lot here in this, as you're here, of course, here, but I we were looking through all our stuff over the last few days and came across this letter in her personal belongings, which was her writing to the family in June 1959. And I want to read it because it was so entertaining. And it's like an ode to motherhood. So she says, aside from my usual duties pertaining to my state in life, as washing, cleaning, menu planning, shopping, baking, cooking, dishwashing, mending, sewing, hairdressing, piano teacher, general instructor of the humanities, ironing, bathing, band-aiding, I find my life circled around the fringe with fringe duties such as weeding, clipping, yard cleaning, pruning, poison spraying, watering, letter writing, bill payer, correspondence secretary, file keeper, money handler, banker, errand runner, trading stamp master, scout consultant, picture taker, picture paster, picture shower, picnic planner, unpopulaire, pool filler, and unfiller, and a few too minor to mention. I hereby am handing in my resignation, regretfully. Some of the above stated fringe duties, it is immaterial to me which duties to be taken over by either our major, grandpa, or minors. Signed this 25th day of June, 1959. She was always doing a million things at once. I'm sure everyone had that experience with her and doing them all so well. And I love that about her. In terms of me personally, I just have so many stories I could go through. I like iconic photos that you guys are coming up here. There's a great photo of me and my brother at one of our graduations, and her stand between us for both our 6th grade and 6th. I love that photo. There's great photos of us on the lake. So many great times on the lake, sailing and playing Scrabble. And as you'll hear, or we have already heard, Scrabble is a huge part of our lives. Definitely both Sadie and I and Sid and Jane would have running Scrabble battles that went through decades, right? And she would keep track of all these. She had this Scrabble battle with Steve, her husband, that went on through their entire lives together until he started getting dementia. And they were tied, she said, after like 40 years. Like she kept every single one, they were exactly tied. She loved that story. She told me all the time. And me and her, same kind of story, where it's like for almost a decade, she beat me every single time. I was like, I'm eventually going to beat her. And I got that upper hand, and then for a decade, I beat her. And then somehow, later in the life, she actually came back to me very easily. I love those. So many hikes and walks, and one of my favorite stories, hikes with her. I love that. We had one year we had this dog. His name was Whitaker, and he was an English pointer, super enthusiastic, blah, 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 all the time. And Grandma was sitting down, we were having lunch, and she was holding her sandwich out like this, talking to me or someone else in the family. And Whitaker just snapped her sandwich. And what can the reaction be? Really mad at the dog. Oh, she just started bawling out and laughing like she was rolling around on the ground. That's just the way she was. And she impacted everyone. I think, I don't know how many people who have had grandmas in their lives that they felt like compelled to talk to their friends about so much. And when my friends would meet her, she would have an impact on them. Why does she care about my friends, whatever? But she would sit down, talk to them, want to know what's going on. And they would always be asking me, what's going on with your grandma? They wanted to know, for years, decades later, they were asking about her grandma. Half of them bought her book and read it. So she just had that way of impacting people. And I just want to finish with it. I think, she has been the core of our family, and we're going to desperately miss that. But I feel like the strength that she gave to everybody in the family, and sort of them coming to Los Alamos, and Los Alamos being part of that strength as we could live here, kind of have that. I don't know, Los Alamos has this way that you can't think about it. It kind of sticks with you even after you've left. And the way she would sit down with everybody she talked to, right? And in that moment, you were the most important person in the world, always, 100% of the time. And she would also, you felt like she was somehow transmitting to the rest of the world how you were the most important person. Of course, not everyone could be the most important person, but we all felt like we were. And so I feel like I would go out into the world and in my friend's life or my career life, and I would go to a job interview or talk in something. And so I don't think you guys understand, but I am the most important person to Stephanie Sydoriak. So therefore, I'm not sure how much I have to say. So I just cherish that, and I couldn't miss her desperately, but I feel so fortunate.
Tom Reedy here. So Tom grew up in the house next door to me. We met when we were probably a year old or something, and became fast friends, and still are. And Tom became, well, he was at my house probably almost as much as I was. I'd come home sometimes and Tom would already be there, snacking through the refrigerator, playing with the dogs or whatever. And every now and then Tom would maybe bring another friend over when I wasn't there. And we both go through the refrigerator. My mom would just love you so much, Tom.
Well, at the risk of repeating some of the things that other people have said, I have this slightly different perspective on Sydoriak House, just because I was part of it, but I wasn't part of it. And I was nearby, but there an awful lot. So I wrote this here just to try and explain a little bit about what happened. Some of it was pretty interesting. When I look back at Stephanie Sydoriak's place in my life, it's hard to know where to start. There are so many directions I could go with this, and I will think of many things that I forgot to mention and share with you as time goes by. I've known Stephanie basically since I was a toddler. By some simple twist of fate, I grew up her next door neighbor on 41st Street in Los Alamos, because Walter and I were the same age and friends as kids. I spent many hours in the Sydoriak house, absorbing the vibes of a large family with lots of highly energetic, imaginative children coming and going, playing music, making things, and reflecting the values of Stephanie and Steve. I did this with the Sydoriaks for something like 15 years. As Steph said, there was a constant flow of neighborhood children coming through her unlocked front door. I was a regular customer. The home provided a pleasant contrast to my own home, which was quiet and studious. Steph and Steve were supportive and fairly permissive, while also being strong guiding lights. She and I watched each other closely. I learned from her, and she nudged me and guided me and listened if I was confused or upset. She could be strong in her discipline, but she mainly wanted to nurture our individuation and creativity. Hidden from view of children and adolescents was a serious work of running a big household and the confounding complexity of parenting. We know from her autobiography that the challenges that Steph and Steve faced day to day behind the scenes, while we lived carefree lives in the garden, the mountains, and the western area. Steve worked hard and effectively, both in his physics at the lab and his job of raising 6 children. Coming from modest means, he made things for the family rather than buying them. He made travel trailers and boats, playhouses and greenhouses, swing sets, a workshop, and endless smaller gadgets, as Sid mentioned. His home was full of his creativity. And we all learned from him. I sense that all of the Sydoriak siblings were hugely affected by this example that Steve set on these levels. Steph worked hard too. Both parents were strategic and passionate and effective. Having 6 children was a big project, and each presented challenges over time. According to her memoir, some of these challenges were almost too much. Almost, but not actually too much. And she used the power of her love to guide everyone. Speaking of her memoir, I only got one mention in the book. It was her description of the night Walter and I and another boy got arrested by the police on the street near our house for committing a crime that I'd rather not disclose. We were 11 or something, and Steph and my father made sure we put an end to that sort of nonsense from then on. Walter and I could be bad boys together. We used to sneak out of our houses in the small hours of the morning and push start their 1966 Datsun sedan down the street and go drive away before we got our driver's licenses, long before we got our driver's licenses. I remember going up into the Valle Grande well after midnight, and finding the caldera full of moonlight and fog like a mystical lake. When we turned around to go home, the stick shift came out of the floor of the car. We were stuck in reverse. After a little short period of hysteria, Walter focused and fixed the problem without tools. And we were home in our beds before the sun came up. I bet Stephanie probably sensed that little bit. Steph had a long-standing health challenge that would rob her energy right when she needed it the most. Remember how everyone would stop what they were doing and help her when these episodes happened. She was frustrated, but she kept going with optimism and strength, and she bounced back again and again. They took their kids out in the world to boat and ski and hike and visit relatives in Boston. Fun was important. That laughter that Steph expressed with that huge smile was so evocative and contagious. I think we can all imagine her smile now. Occasionally they took me on an adventure, like camping and boating in Steve's homemade boats on Mullis Lake in the San Juan Mountains. But my favorite Sydoriak expedition was camping in Taos Valley in January. We slept in tents on the snow near the creek with night temperatures at about 10 degrees. It was fun, memorable, and cold. Does anybody else say, do you remember this? Was it green that As if having 6 kids was not enough, we all entered the 60s and 70s and shared in the social turmoil. The Sydoriak house was full of music of the times, Peter, Paul, and Mary, the incredible string band, the Grateful Dead, Joan Baez. I'm sure Steph hoped we would all just glean the beautiful music, the organic food, long hair, and the rejection of violence. But we had the mind-altering drugs readily available in Los Alamos, and for some, these substances drew us in. Steph called it dropping out. Steph and Steve were liberal and accepting, but they also wanted their kids around them to be happy and fulfilled by their incredible talents. They didn't care where their kids went in terms of place or work. They just wanted us to thrive in our individual abilities. They were wary of our better living through chemistry. But nobody overdid it. We all set boundaries. Walter always stayed focused and interested in his specific abilities through this period. As his parents' son, he became a true artist. Whether it was teaching himself to type when he was something like 9 years old, or mastering the mandolin, building the mandolin, painting watercolors, or getting high grades. And I think all his other SIP were basically exactly the same. When this incredible era stopped requiring all of Steph's full-time attention, Steph devoted herself to teaching piano and writing. Eventually, the piano went aside and she wrote. She was an excellent writer. She understood how important her Ukrainian heritage was, and she wrote the history of her family. She wrote poems and letters. Craig Russell, a professional musician we just heard from, was one of those kids going freely in and out of her front door. He wrote some music around her poems in 2005. He gave a public performance for Steph's writing life. She loved this, and she told me in a 600-word email after that. I think it was really one of the highlights of her life. What a person. Physics, liturgy, parenting, home economics, child psychology, elder care, and more elder care. At the center of it all was her love for Steve. That was the core. And of course, her kids were only half a beat off from that point of her life focus. In the last year, her smile beamed sincerely. We would talk for hours, and she and my wife Marie grew close. The last times I saw her, she expressed courage and acceptance of her imminent demise. She emphasized the need for all of us to accept life as it really is. There are people who have outsized influence on our lives. Had we not moved in next to the Sydoriaks, or they moved in next to us, whatever it was, I can't imagine who I would be today. I will always miss her. have one more thing that I need to say, and I will leave it to Walter to explain this to you. John Jacob, you will understand. That's my name too.
Yeah, I think I know what he means by that. Yeah. My dad, when he was in MIT and in Yale, was a member of outdoor clubs, and they had a songbook this thick. And often on hikes, he would start singing these humorous little songs repeatedly. One of them was John Jacob Jingleheimer. Yeah, we had a lot of those beautiful songs. Now we're going to hear from someone who can't be here, Martha Boyachevsky, a dear friend of Stephanie's.
And I also want to mention we just got the coffee out. We were a little slow on the uptake of coffee, so if anyone is feeling groggy in this heat, please do go help yourself. It's in the entry room. Also, I do want to say that the John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt song is not going to be stuck in my head for the next 16 months. So thanks, Tom.
Yeah.
All right, this is from Martha. Stephanie Sydoriak, as you all know, was born, raised, and educated in Boston. She came to Los Alamos as a young mother and dedicated her life to her family and to the city. The city recognized her multifaceted contributions and named her its living treasure. But there's a lesser-known aspect of Stephanie Sydoriak. She was born to Ukrainian parents who imbued her with a deep understanding and appreciation of a cultural Ukraine. So although Ukraine was a shell of a country during the Soviet times, constantly battling the real threat of Russification and off-limits to foreigners, Stephanie, to her dying days, continued to promote Ukrainian spiritual and cultural heritage. She fought for Ukraine's place among the free nations. She visited the independent Ukraine and wrote and spoke about it. She even succeeded in introducing elements of Ukrainian religious customs and ancient practices to the local Catholic parish in Los Alamos. There's a bumper now, right over here. Ukrainians bring eggs, breads, and other traditional foods to the resurrection services to be blessed by the priest and then enjoyed by the parish. We'll let Christopher go on.
These things are wonderful until we do that.
So this is an ancient folk ritual welcoming spring that became an integral to the Ukrainian Christian practice. When her children were growing up in Los Alamos, Stephanie made certain that they engaged in that practice. She translated the ceremony into English, and the understanding Catholic pastor encouraged willing practitioners to participate. Stephanie's musical, literary, and poetic prowess was well known in the whole area. She used it to promote knowledge of Ukraine among New Mexico's diverse population. She liked to hear stories about the Ukrainian Carpathian Mountains and wondered if she would ever explore them. I especially appreciated the work she put into publishing 2 volumes of her memoirs. I tried to promote the books among the Ukrainian Americans, but few of us matched Stephanie's generous nature and energetic activism. I tried to get the volumes translated into Ukrainian, but Ukraine began to face increasing political problems, and finally the unprovoked military invasion of the country. Stephanie felt the pain of this new calamity on Ukraine deeply. Stephanie was a most giving soul. She friended my brother, Igor Bohachevsky, a colleague of Stephen Sydoriak, as close family. When Igor aged, I spent weeks at a time in Los Alamos and came to count Stephanie among my close friends. Traditionally, Ukrainians greeted each other with either the Christian "Praise be to Jesus Christ" or the older, simpler "Be well." After the Russians invaded Ukraine and the Western Allies offered to spirit Ukraine's young and untested president out of Kiev to safety, Zelensky shot back, "I don't need a ride, I need ammunition." Ukrainians appreciated the response and stood firmly with him. When he introduced a new greeting, "Glory to Ukraine," and its answer, "Glory to the heroes," many of us in the West were surprised at how rapidly the new greeting became popular. The foreign officials who visited Kiev picked it up, and soon one could hear it on American television. At the best, it augmented the old greetings, but quickly replaced them. My last few phone conversations with Stephanie were on the course of the Ukrainian resistance to Russian invaders. As I again contemplate Stephanie's rich life, I realize how seamlessly it flows into its well-deserved spot as Ukrainian hero. Her interests, her complex identity that made her the strong, enduring, and creative person she was, placed Stephanie Sydoriak of Los Alamos, New Mexico, a true hero of Ukraine. When Ukrainians shout glory to the heroes, they mean not only the fallen soldiers on the front, but the thousands of Ukrainians abroad, the Chopeks, the Sydoriaks, who preserved an understanding of the Ukraine of suffering and resistance. Yes, but primarily a people full of life and creativity, successfully making the world aware that there is a Ukraine, and they are the carriers of Ukraine's values. And Stephanie, gentle yet determined, an active American endowed also with Ukraine's spirituality and culture, is a sterling example of that true heroism. And I greet Stephanie Sydoriak as a hero. But I'll also whisper softly, stay well until we meet again.
Okay. There's a few more here. There's one letter I'm going to read first from a friend of mine who couldn't be here. I found this when I was going through my mother's files in her house. He's got some spicy language, but I'll take care of that. He was pretty close to my mom, but he didn't fear, speaking anything with my mom. This is from Evan. At the time, it was Evan Goldblatt. He's now Evan Lewis. I pulled into the parking lot in front of my house tonight and was just about to turn the radio off when an old memory came over the speaker. We have this great radio station out here. It's a grandchild of KFAT. It's called KTAG. It's probably the most progressive, whatever the heck that means, and hip radio station in the world. This is 1995. Over the speakers comes an old Mississippi John Hurt song. There are about 10 people on the planet who have the slightest idea who this fellow Mississippi John Hurt is or was. What's even more incredible is about hearing this fellow's music on the radio is that I heard this same album 25 years ago at the Sydoriak house. There I was, an uptight, conservative, white bread, defense, city, atomic bomb, physics, cone head, buzz cut, barbed wire. The outside world does not exist, Los Alamos. And I was listening to this funky black guy, Mississippi John Hurt. The bizarre qualities of this situation are astronomical. And there the album cover was, sitting on the desk next to the photograph of the Sydoriaks, just as easy as a glass of milk. What an incredible thing. How wonderful. The incredible string band, Hendrix, the Eagles, the Dead, New Riders, Hot Tuna, just to name a few, and all the wonderfully twisted mind that goes along with it all. I feel pretty lucky. I don't know who exactly to thank, most likely Sid, but again, thanks to everybody, Walt and the parents. It's overwhelming. Might not seem like much to everybody, but it means a lot to me. I hope you Sydoriaks don't take this stuff for granted. I knew a lot of families in Los Alamos, and none of them had Mississippi John Hurt hanging around. We have someone all the way from back east. Is Oksana wanting to speak? They just arrived yesterday on a long flight from far, far away.
Hello, my name is Oksana.
Close as you can.
Say again? My name is Oksana Sydoriak, or Sydoriak. I knew about my Western family. I grew up in New York City. I knew about my Western family, but never met them really for the longest time. Things that I had never done. And by chance, I happened to meet a Chopper at a Ukrainian resort about 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And she came up to me, she said, are you a Sydoriak? And I said, yeah. And she says, oh man, my sister's married to your uncle. I said, really? Who are you? And she said, Anna Chopin. I said, I know the name. And then she said, Sydoriak. Oh yeah, I know. So she gave me the number. I called up Stephanie, and it's like we knew each other all of our lives. She was fun to talk to. She was funny, and we probably promised each other that we meet. Well, of course, I didn't go out there. I first met her in New York because she loved to travel. And she came over. We had a wonderful time. She was happy about everything. She was excited about seeing the High Line that had just opened. She was excited about seeing all the Ukrainian places, the church, the institute. We had such a wonderful time. She stayed with us a few days, and then she stayed with my mom, who didn't speak English too much. And I was wondering how they're going to get along. And they got along well, because Stephanie apparently understood a lot more Ukrainian than I thought. She couldn't speak it. So my mother would speak in Ukrainian, and Stephanie would respond in English, and they got along swimmingly. So finally we came out here. She told us, you have to see my beautiful mom. And we said, okay, we'll be nearby. We're going to be in Phoenix. This is a New Yorker talk.
Yeah.
And she says, pause. And she says, Oksana, you know, the distances there are a lot bigger than they are out east. I said, yeah, we'll drive. Now, she joined us in Phoenix. We drove back together. She showed us the sights. We had a wonderful time. One memory stands out. She was so friendly and so much fun. We stayed in a hotel. My son loves trains. So by some accident, every hotel that he booked was right next to a train line. And one of them was really close. And so the next morning, and there was a train going through every half hour at night. And they were long trains. And the next morning, I asked Steph, I called her Tata Steph, and I said, Tata, did you get any sleep? Oh, yeah, I had a wonderful time. He said, didn't you hear all those trains going through? Oh, yeah, I heard the first one. And I then went downstairs, and they just changed my room to the other side. Oh. The other one was in the next town. We were sleeping late, because we were probably watching the trains at night. We come down for breakfast, and she's there, and we said, well, it's time to go for breakfast, but this hotel doesn't give free breakfast. She goes, oh, that's okay, I've had breakfast. I said, where did you have breakfast? She goes, oh, I went to the next hotel. I said, you did what? And she says, well, I walked in there. They asked me, why am I here? And I said, well, I'm in that hotel over there. They're not serving breakfast. But can I have your breakfast? And they said, okay. So somehow she had this endearing quality that I really enjoyed, and we had a wonderful time together. And I'm always amazed at how she put so much Ukrainian into all of it. Look, you've got embroidered shirts. I don't have embroidered shirts. I'm wearing them. And this was a person who grew up in the United States at a time when being a hyphenated American was not really acceptable. You were either American or not. And she managed to get you to love the place, to love the language, to love the culture, and remarkable, wonderful. And so I just wanted to say something in Ukrainian. There's a saying that I learned back a few years ago. It says, "Дякую за дар вашого життя," which translates into, thank you for the gift of your life. And Tata Stefan, дякую за дар вашого життя.
Thank you. Is Christiane? I guess I got something, that book to read something. So, I'm not sure what is there. So we have one more from a person who could not be here.
Oh, there we go, sorry. I'm not that person. Oh. My name is Lori Taylor, and I was fortunate enough to be a very close friend of Mary's. And I just want to speak for Mary, maybe a little bit. I saw the family somewhat surprised.
And what, you know, this has been said, I hadn't planned on saying it, so I'm a little shy of it. But just the joy and the creativity and the love is just a blessing to be alive in that history. Everyone has always said this. And I just want to say it too. I have two really, whenever I talk about Mary, there are two meanings I have. And they all involve us not being able to stop laughing. We just, once we started laughing, it was over. And we were up skiing, we both involved skiing. And we were going up the T-bar. And we were laughing about something. And we both fell over backwards. And we had one ski hooked, both of us, one on each other side. One ski hooked in the middle, and the other ski would drag me along. And we just, of course, you know, people were looking at us like, oh my gosh, you gotta stop the lift, you gotta stop the lift. But we were just laughing, just so hard. And it was just such a joy. And another time we were skiing and we were at the top of the mountain and Mary went through a little dip. And she went through the dip and her skis went up over her head and she caught in a tree. So she went upside down and her skis stuck in the tree. Once again laughing so hard that, you know, we were just really having trouble recovering. And Chris, we were together and Mary, through Stephanie and through the family, I learned a bit of people about the mountains and nature. And I'm just very grateful. And thank you for letting me come up with it. Just thank you for.
Thank you so much. And we will open this up after the last letter. We'll open it up to anybody else who feels like they want to share anything, their story, or anything else. And this is, again, Saiki, granddaughter, reading a letter from Eileen Burke.
Thank you all. And I know we've all been sitting for a long time, so do please feel free to get coffee or drinks. There's plenty of ice at any time. We're all warm. So this is from Eileen Burke. Stephanie showed me Los Alamos, Taos, and Santa Fe. We did some hiking and a night at the opera. She regretted that her energy was not what it was when she was younger, but I didn't notice any loud. We shared a love for opera, so being at the Santa Fe Opera was quite a treat. Stephanie was introduced to me by Sally Pizzullo, mother-in-law to her grandson, Dimitri, who wants to give away. She thought I would appreciate Stephanie's new book, 100% Ukrainian, 100% American. I enjoyed the book so much that I invited her to speak at the Rochester branch of the Ukrainian National Women's League of America. She came to visit the spring of 2014 and spoke at Writers and Books, a literary institution in Rochester. Her talk was enjoyed by all in attendance and many copies of her book were sold. Stephanie and I continued regular email correspondence, and I enjoyed receiving her annual Christmas letter. She was a lady with many talents, both musical and artistic. And what I appreciated most about Stephanie was her love for Ukrainian culture. Although she lived in a community which initially had no other Ukrainians, she was keen on sharing her culture with Mom. She did that with her Pisanki demonstrations and teaching Ukrainian songs at the Roman Catholic choir she led. She did express some regret about not being in a large Ukrainian community. And I'm sure I'm going to not pronounce this right, but Vichnaya Pamyat, eternal memory.
Actually, I should first say that the shirt that was mentioned is my father's shirt, and he used to dance in it when he was. Anyway, if there's someone else that wants to speak, feel free. If not, then here comes some really. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Kathy Hinojosa. I was Kathy Dumont in Pueblo High School. But I wanted to mention Stephanie as a real adventure She loved adventure and skied and we hiked. And we were part of the WOW women. Everybody know about the WOW women? WOW stands for Women on Wheeler, or Women of the Wilderness, or Women on the Water, whatever you decide. But we had some great adventures together. And my fondest memory with Stephanie wasn't so much fun, it was more horrifying for me. But we went cross-country skiing in Pagosa Springs, Colorado in January. And we stayed there at the hot springs, and we got to go in the hot springs. My roommate went out at 5 in the morning, got into the hot springs and back. Well, Stephanie and I were cross-country skiing, and she was on oxygen at the time. And she ran out of oxygen while we're cross-country skiing. And I was just really scared and concerned because I thought, what if she can't breathe? And she's like, oh, don't worry about it. I've got another tank in the car. So we went back to the car and got her oxygen, and that was it for the day. But that's my fondest memory of Stephanie.
Thank you. Anyone else? So we're going to finish up with one more song. Oh, somebody, yeah, come on up. Oh, yeah. Yay. Alan Embry was also living in the same house that Tom Levy eventually moved into, right? You were living in, before Tom, and a very close friend of Stephanie.
Right, and I know we're coming to the end and maybe we're a little tired, but I just a couple of images I have of stuff. One of them is looking at those photographs of her arms completely wide open. Just like everything. Absolutely celebrating it. She told me this story once of after Steve was really fine with dementia. And he was forgetting who she was, and she said, "I'm your sister, my wife, my mother. Well, what am I?" He got this big, bright smile on his face. And he said, "You're my everything." And there's that quality of this, of we are all here. Just embraced us for who we are, that we were. She was staying at her house once, and she was into her already into her 90s. And she said, "I was lucky for a very long time." And I realized it in well over 70 years. And she had loved Los Angeles for a very long time. She loved all of her kids for a very long time. And she loved us all as us. She loved me as a 5-year-old pyromaniac to sit. A 15-year-old destroying the tennis court with curses and yells and destroyed net. But this is 25 years old, 35 years old. What is it? That's who we were. That's part of the beauty. It's just loving the world, loving us. Just love.
Okay, looks like we might have great-grand sons. Come on up.
So, Abja was an amazing doctor. She helped me so much. She made me feel really good. And when I was with her, there was this thing that I was following with her. We didn't finish it. We were about to finish it. But that's probably we would say we're cheating. Scrabble word. And she didn't care. She's like, still have more points than us. So she's better than the cheater. Anyway, when I was in the hospital with her, some of her last days in the hospital room, I asked her on the phone. She gave me. I just heard the mini crossover with her, and she got it. Like, even even state. And it was super amazing. She's a very smart woman. And she was late.
Anybody else?
I'm a person who fight like my mother. I use things all the time. I'm completely disorganized. I can't find my food. Well, I have to be disorganized.
This is another Kate Wolf song. It reminds me of my mother a bit. The verses speak about being up at night, insomnia. It speaks about the mountains. It speaks about birds, a little bit. She loved birds. And she's gone to the other side of the mountain. What this song is going to be. I think you're going to have a hard time hearing the lyrics because I'm going to be singing way back here, but I'll try and sing loud. Or professionals.
He's actually a professional. His band won Strawberry Bluegrass.
I tune because I care. It's all part of the act. got your son in my head.
Oh, you're right, and you need different people. Oh. I was young, the mom told me, she said, child, take your time. Oh,
I've been walking in my sleep, counting trouble, steady counting sheep. Where the years went, I can't say. Just turn around and they run away. I've been sifting through the dusty book, daily paper. They tell a story I used to know, one that happened so long ago. It's gone away yesterday. Now I find myself on the mountainside, when the rivers change direction across the great divide. Well, I heard the owl calling softly as the night was falling. With the question I replied, but she's gone across the borderline. She's gone away yesterday, and I find myself on the mountainside, where the rivers change direction across the great divide.
One time my mother told me, she said, that's not really the way rivers work. They don't change direction. Well, she's a physicist. They don't change direction. I said, yeah, you're right, Mom. One starts on one side, it goes that way. The other starts on the other side, it goes that way. You're right. And that's kind of what I feel like's happened now. I'm still on one side of the mountain. My mother's gone off to the other side of the mountain. Someday we'll meet down in that big ocean.
And I find myself on the mountainside, where the rivers change direction across the great divide. Where the rivers change direction across the great divide.
Ukrainian circle dance. It's an Irish piece called Sketch Reel. Thank you for the patience, and thank you all so much for coming to Stephanie Sydoriak Celebration of Life. And thanks to the chefs in the back, Bernadette Lujan, who was a dear friend of Stephanie's and took care of her for the last several years. Kate Joseph, who came in and took care of all the medications. Thank you so much. And enjoy the food. It's in the back room.
Also, Juan,
Hey.
thank you for running the live stream.
Yeah,
It's hard to do.
It was, yeah, hopefully it was acceptable.
Yeah.